that is your passion, put your fears and emotions to the side and pray for your enemies. The Bible says God will make your enemies your footstool. And then someone else agreed with her and said yes. First thing I'm going to address is the first thing she said, where she said, why does the church deal with racism more? Let's be very, very, very frank here. Racism is a very hard topic to talk about in church over a pulpit when people are not able to talk back to you. That's just what it is. When you are at a church and you are speaking about a topic like racism, first of all, it's very complex, very multidimensional, meaning there's so many aspects to racism. Are we in the conversation trying to get to a solution? What are we going for here? And depending on whatever we're trying to accomplish with the conversation, depends on how we're going to approach it. I know at my church, it is a very intentional thing that we at least talk about racism and bring it up with solutions in mind at least one time a year. At least one time a year. And if we can bring it up at least one time a year, it seems like the responsible thing to do because we recognize what our people are going through. And if our people their needs are not being addressed, then that's a problem for us. That's a problem for us. So I pose it to you. Do you think racism should be talked about in church more than one time a year, more than 2 times a year? Are you looking for a Bible series? I'm curious how much you would want to hear that type of conversation in the church. That's the first question she asked. Why doesn't church deal with it more? All right, we have another comment. It says, take responsibility for what you can, but cast the thing you don't control over to God. There is a lot of nuance. There's a lot of nuance in this. Let me tell you what I think. When I read the question, I am concerned that she will see racism no matter where she goes. But I also know racism is real. I had a coworker who came for my throat. One time it got to the point where she actually set out her mouth, you probably don't have no problems at all. You just like literally, this lady was like white lady in her 40s and finally just overflowed with how much she did not like me. And I was in my 20s. I was like 26 at the time, 27. And she just all of a sudden decided she didn't like me and she was upset and she just tripped out. Like she just tripped out on me. And it was really difficult for me to deal with because I was like, why does this lady not like me for no reason? But eventually I felt like it was just had to do with the fact that I was Black. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. And I agree with what someone said here, where they said, like, give it to God, cast it to him. But let's take that a step further. What does giving it to God and trusting God, casting the situation to him actually look like? Because you got to make moves. She had to make moves. She was in a workplace where it looks like a conversation was had with her about her being different. A conversation was had about the work she was doing. Someone else took credit for it. All of this. There are some ways that you can navigate in a workplace that is still Christ-like, but you're not being run over. Do you feel me? And here's what I mean. Because Jesus, let me go back. Jesus was not a pushover. He was not a pushover. And if we're following the example of Jesus, because here in this space, we do. You're following the example of Jesus, you can speak up for yourself. But notice, Jesus didn't speak up all the time. I'm curious for this person. I would ask them, how much are you saying what you don't like? How much is your disapproval of your coworkers and who they are a part of how you operate? Because if you get to a place where hatred or bitterness, resentment, someone even called it out earlier. Let me scroll back here up on Facebook. They were talking about forgiving them. If she does not forgive these folks she's working with, she is going to act out in a way where God cannot move. You can't be protected and fight back at the same time. If you are really giving God the situation, you're giving it to him in prayer. And then when you're showing back up at work, you are showing up in a heart space where, yep, you can know somebody is racist. You can know that they don't like you. You can know that they're tripping and still outperform them. She talked about, and let that be the work. Your excellent work, speaks for itself. But you are praying, asking God, when can I move? When can I go somewhere else? All right. We have a comment on YouTube and it says, relying on him to give you the words and actions to take. And when to take them is very crucial. So this person says, yes, Sheila's like, which is the person who's on YouTube, that she's like, I need you to know when you need to move. And hearing from God is very critical, because if you're dealing with racism at work, it is, first of all, heartbreaking. And it's something that you cannot fight alone. Practically speaking, you guys know I have over 15 years experience in HR, recruiting, human resources. Has she told HR? Did you go through the proper channels? Before you quit and walked away, did you file a serious complaint to where, because honestly, employment law protects all protected classes and race is one of them. Did you go through the channels? That's the practical side. You make sure you submit something in HR. Yes, you know, people may find out you submit it because it'll need to be investigated. But if you were going to quit anyway, you might as well see that thing all the way through to the end until you find you another job. It sounds like she walked away from a job and she can't get back into the industry. That is really unfortunate. And I know that that could not have been God's best and what he wanted for you. We have a comment on Facebook which says, I think once is enough. I honestly appreciate going to diverse church, and racism is not beat with a dead horse. So this person is saying talking about race one time a year is fine for her. Thanks for that, Alicia. Shakira says, historically, the church functions as the primary leader for civil rights. Absolutely. We know that the voice for African-American people, that voice was only heard in our own churches and in our own communities for decades. The church was where we got dressed up and we were able to have our biggest problems addressed through the pulpit. Time has gone on and racism for all of us is not the biggest fight of our life. For some of us, it's poverty. That is the biggest fight. For some of us, it is a disability. It's so many different things. But back then, it was everything. Race drove everything, and things have evolved quite a bit. Someone else goes on to say, self-assessment, life coach, seeking to get help from someone on the outside looking in. That's good, Alicia. This is when you really would have wanted a mentor, someone that can actually tell you, like, here's what I would do. Here's what I would do. Here's how I would get counsel. So one, I don't think the church would be the best place to eradicate racism. At the same time, I think churches should say something. But you want to make sure you got the right people speaking, because what you don't want coming from a pulpit is hate. If hate comes from a pulpit, if that pastor is racist, or he is sharing from, or he or she is sharing from an experience of hate or bitterness, it will spread like a virus through that church. And there is no way that that is what God wants. So I am all for churches addressing it, but you better make sure that if you're going to address it, or if your church is going to bring that stuff up, that it is done towards a solution or education of that congregation, but it is not done in a way to spread hate. We do not want racism to spread. All right. We're about to move on to our second question. I'm going to take these comments that you guys have here, and it says, HR, yes, go to HR, then left because I was treated differently after HR handled it. Yeah. So it looks like you got, what do they call it? Retaliation. Retaliation is something that can happen when you submit an HR request, depending on the organization. And that's why I'm saying for this person, it looks like she was going to quit anyway. Then she might as well have just gone all the way through with the HR thing and get it on the record for that company of a racist situation she encountered. Because if it becomes a trend, they have to address it. All right, on Facebook, Rashida says, if you feel unsafe, you have to leave. Safety should not be in question. My husband has helped me to see my different treatment in a positive light. If you expect to be treated better than the way they are treating you, change your expectation. Let me make sure I read that correctly. She said, Brashina said, my husband helped me to see my differential treatment in a positive light. If you expect to be treated better than the way they are treating you, change your expectation. Then get the negative behavior in writing. Oh, write it down. You need every incident you need documented. That is, y'all. Do you know that these emails are legally binding that you're writing for your companies? They're legally binding. If you send an email after this lady talked to her about being treated different, she should have went to her desk, followed up an email, recapping the conversation, and send the email to this lady. Because it is documenting the conversation that was said and talking about how she's being different. If it was solely based on race, because we're assuming that she's not blinded by the conversation of race and that she could see clearly. All right. Brashina goes on to say, then get the negative behavior in writing. The biggest problems we have will not be addressed in the pulpit. I think it is best addressed in small groups. And I can tend to agree with that. And that's me. Document everything. Oh, you better document. Christians, I feel like sometimes I love us to pieces, but part of the point of this podcast, the Don't Be Useless podcast, is education on things so we can deliver on our vision, build our confidence, and use our God. And practical wisdom comes along with that. You should be documenting everything. When someone compliments your work, you're making a note of that. When you have a difficult conversation, email a recap when that thing is over. Because what you're doing is creating a paper trail for behavior. You don't need to carry that stuff around in your heart. You're supposed to be the light of the world. Don't let all this stuff start choking that out. But you're being wise by keeping a track record of what is happening all around you. This last comment says, it's difficult to separate poverty from systematic racism. Oh, yes, it is. Shakira, you preaching today? She goes on to say, poverty disproportionately impacts people of color. Yes, it does. We came from slavery, was given nothing, and we have crawled our way up out. Yes, we did. I love the way our church handles it. Woo woo, Faith for Life, out in Austin. Of course, consistently encourages a blended church family. Yes, we do. And in us encouraging a blended church family, we also don't want to ignore the fact of what people that look like me deal with. The best way to overcome bias is to know one another. When you get to know people and develop relationships with people, it is hard for racism to still exist unless they are just a bigot. That's a whole nother thing. If they're a bigot and they are bent on it, it's what it is. Can I share something that happened to me at this company I work for that shall remain nameless, but it starts with an A and it's like the biggest company in the world that starts with an A. I was teaching diversity and inclusion training. I was a certified trainer for this company. And after one of the trainings, which most of my team went to, so I trained over 400 recruiters specifically who had the task of diversifying this company more. Okay. And I was also a person diversifying the company. It was part of my job. Well, one of my coworkers, white guy in his 30s, married 2 kids. And you know what he says to me? He says, Priscilla, can I ask you a serious question? And I said, yes. He says to me, Priscilla, I grew up hearing racist jokes my whole life. And then I got older and learned that you're not supposed to see race. Y'all, I see a net and I want to kill it. Okay. So he says, and I'm not supposed to see race. You know what he goes on to say to me? But in that training, you told me to notice and you told me to pay attention and be sensitive to other races. That means I now have to change the way I think about ignoring race. And actually now I have to see race. And he's like, Priscilla, that is hard because I can still hear my grandfather and my father making jokes about Black people. So he literally is uncomfortable many times around people that are Black because he is torn in the fact of, I don't know how to be. I thought I was supposed to ignore race. We're all one race. But now you're telling me that I should notice and I should make room for the differences in other people, which means I have to pay attention to the fact that our skin is different colors. And I told him, I was like, that's right. You have to notice. And when you notice, will you accept? because we want you to be able to accept the differences, accept the fact that we're different, accept the fact that I don't look like you and you don't look like me. And once you've accepted that, I need you to make room for how we're different. I don't want you to think you're better than me because your skin is a different color or because your ancestors may not have been slaves. So this is a real conversation I've had in a workplace in the company whose name shall, remain nameless. It's what it is. It is what it is. All right. We have another question here before I leave you with a profuse point. And this question says this. It's much lighter question. It says, I took in this single mom who lived with me for nearly a year. I did not charge her rent. I did not have her pay for anything except her own groceries, what she did for her and her child. I even watched her child or babysit her child multiple times, a couple of times for a whole day while she went to court. And the question is, one day I was backing out of the driveway and I accidentally hit her car. The car is fully functioning. I scraped the bumper. The car, you can tell that it's been scraped, but it's still damaged. The lady that I let live with me came to me and asked me what type of arrangement we needed to make for me to pay for the damages on her car. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm not sure if I should even pay for the damages because I've let her live here, utility and rent free, for nearly a year. What should I do? What should I do? Okay, this conversation is very, very different than our one about racism. This is much lighter. Y'all, this person said they took somebody in. They live, y'all, I'm going to have to get this Nat. They lived with them for a long time. They hit their car and they do not feel like they should have to pay for it. It sounds like they feel like they shouldn't have to pay for it because they've let that person live there for rent free and everything and have watched the baby and all this other stuff. So I need to know what you guys think. What you think about this situation. Okay. All right. And I see that Facebook. All right. So Facebook, someone says, calculate what rent would have cost her. That is so funny. So it sounds like Andrea. It sounds like Andrea, who's a sharer on Facebook. Thanks you so much for sharing out that we're live now. It tells me if you shared. So she pretty much is saying, look, if she didn't charge her rent, why is she now saying that she needs to pay her and be here free? You can have your own space, your own room. I'll watch your child. I'll do whatever and another. And that was the agreement. So the mistake was made of hitting the car, but y'all know car repairs are not cheap. It could be $500, it could be $1,000, whatever. So what is this? So it says, someone else says, I agree. They shouldn't have to pay for the damages. She got a lot of nerve asking. Oh my goodness. Someone else says it's petty. Y'all, I struggle in my heart because I low-key feel like it's petty. I was like, what? A whole year of no rent, free babysitting. Y'all, and who ain't no telling what else. Okay, it says they should have been able to talk about it. Oh, Diane, I'm not sure which one you talk about, the racism situation or what we're talking about now with the roommate. Have an honest conversation, including what she feels. We many times shy away from honest conversations. That is true. That is true. But it looks like they did have a conversation because the person who was living there for free approached them saying like, hey, so what are we going to do for the pay, to get this thing paid? Okay, Diane's talking about the roommate situation. They should be able to talk about it. Yeah. So it looks like it's been talked about and the girl wants her car paid for by the person who gave her a free life. Okay. So y'all, life gets complicated, don't it? It gets complicated. And I hope that you guys were able to pull something out of what we talked about. I love y'all. Y'all being here makes this just so great. As most of you guys know, I have a very special situation happening in my life right now with my husband still being in the hospital. Prayerfully, he comes home today. So we'll see how that goes. But it is just a breath of fresh air to be here with all of you guys today and just hang out with you and talk with you, even though YouTube got blocked, y'all. YouTube is tripping today. I want to leave you with this profuse point. I saw many times over the internet this week, he is risen, right? It was Easter yesterday. It was Easter, okay? We got through it. We didn't try to create moments for our kids. We've done the stuff, okay? Watch church online and all of that. But it did lead me to think about a specific point, and here's the profuse point I want to make today. What needs to die so you can rise again? What needs to die so you can rise again? We heard the story yesterday for Easter. We know that Jesus died on the cross, and then he went to hell, took the keys, rose again, and he even went back to the disciples who he loved and showed them, look, I keep my promises. I'm here. I'm back up in this thing. And then he ascends to heaven, which gives us all power. And we have so much authority and power, the Holy Spirit living in us, right? But part of the moments leading up to his death, he took on such immense pain. God had to, I've heard it explained this way, God had to turn his back on him as he took on the sins of the world, because the sin and God cannot coexist. And Jesus says out of his mouth, Lord, Lord, why have you forsaken me? Some of us feel a little bit forsaken right now. We may feel a little bit walked away from God. We don't, understand or want to be in the type of situations or relationship with God that we're in, or the lack thereof. And y'all, I think there are some things that in this quarantine time, like God is really saying, I need certain things to die that you may rise again. This has been a theme of conversation with me for the last 2 weeks, and I can't shake it. I don't know if that means the people who are listening, haven't gotten it, or this is the first time you're hearing it. But in this quarantine time, is it fear that you need to let die? Are you keeping fear alive in your home, fear alive in your conversations? Are you keeping selfishness? Is it hard for you to think of others? Are you consumed with and because you're not being grateful, your attitude is bad all the time. And I need that to stop. I want that to go away. And so, guys, I just want to challenge you to really consider, what is it that you hold on to that God is like, I need peace. I need a resurrection. I need you to really let me in the spaces you don't want me to be in. So we're doing a 21-day fast and prayer with my church. It started today. Today is day 1. And let me tell you something that I have to let die. Can I be honest with my fam? I have to let my craving for sweet tea die. Okay? I have to let her go. Okay? She needs to die. Let me tell you why. Because she is adding pounds to my loins. That is unnecessary. Okay? Call me petty. Call me petty if you want to. But my husband being in the hospital, he ain't been eating for over like a week and a half. He is skinty. I was like, I just don't want to be that girl with the super skinny husband. Let this happen. I cannot. So part of this fast is I'm like, God, what do I need to let go of for my health and just in general? Because I'm like, there's something I keep holding on to. And honestly, I've been stressed. Like, I had to be real. Like, man, I feel a little bit stressed, a little bit overwhelmed. I'm going to comfort food and comfort things. And I'm like, I need to stop this. I need to let it go. So something that I'm choosing is actually a physical item, sweet tea or whatever, like to let it go. But I'm also going to be praying more. I'm stepping up my prayer game so I can really get real about what needs to happen in me that God wants to do. He wants me to let go of something, then I need to let it go. He wants me to be something different than I need to be. And so I'm just going to challenge you guys today as we close out. Like, what is that thing in you? Don't know what to do and not do it. Right? Don't know what to do and not do it. Do what you got to do. Okay? I love you guys so much. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Don't Be Useless podcast. If you have a question you would like us to jump into, I want you to hit me up at hello@ItsPriscillaB.com. hello@ItsPriscillaB.com. Send in your questions so that way we can jump into those next week in our podcast, whatever the situation may be. It may be a current situation. It may be something that has passed altogether. We will debate it and talk about it and bring in some amazing wisdom into that thing. I also want to ask you guys that when you see the podcast pop up, make sure you run that thing through and play it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen, so that way I can keep those numbers up because they are paid attention to, and we want this podcast to grow. So make sure that you're sharing it out, you're telling folks about it, and you visited ItsPriscillaB.com and join my actual community on the website. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you guys soon.